6 months had passed since the encounter with the Thylorians, and the galaxy was changing. The humans aboard the Horizon's Edge could see it in every message they received, every species they met, every star system they visited. The Villani were no longer afraid to travel through former Creek's territory. They had formed a coalition with 12 other peaceful species, calling themselves the Free Traders Alliance. For the first time in centuries, they were expanding their roots instead of hiding. The Creek's empire was in chaos. Half their worlds had declared independence after learning that the unstoppable Creeks could be defeated by creatures a third their size. The remaining Creeks forces were too busy fighting civil wars to threaten anyone else. Most surprising of all, the Thylorians had split into thousands of individual minds. Some had gone insane from the shock of being alone with their thoughts. Others had discovered creativity and art for the first time in millions of years. A few had even built physical bodies for themselves, wanting to experience the universe the way humans did. Captain Minho stood on the bridge, reading reports from across the galaxy. Each one told the same story. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years were talking to each other, asking the same question humans had taught them to ask. Why does it have to be this way? Captain, said Communications Officer Hieri, I'm getting a priority message from Earth. It's from Galactic Command. Minho nodded. They had been expecting this call. Word of their adventures had reached home, and Earth's leaders wanted to know what their exploration ship had accidentally done to galactic politics. Admiral Park Young-ho appeared on the main screen, his face serious but not angry. Captain Lee, your mission was to make peaceful contact with alien species. Instead, you've apparently started a galactic revolution. Yes, sir, Minho said simply. It wasn't intentional. I'm sure it wasn't, the Admiral replied with a slight smile. But the results speak for themselves. We're getting communication requests from over 300 alien species. Some want to join an alliance with Earth. Others want us to mediate their conflicts. A few want us to rule them. Dr. Jiwoo looked up from her medical station. Rule them? The former subjects of the Crix Empire, the Admiral explained. They're calling humans the liberator species and asking us to establish a new galactic government. The crew exchanged glances. They had come to explore and make friends, not to become galactic rulers. What are your orders, sir? Minho asked. Admiral Park was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. Earth's government has decided that humans are not ready to rule other species. We can barely govern ourselves. But we can't ignore what's happening out there either. He leaned forward. Your new mission is to help establish what we're calling the Galactic Council. A democratic body where all species have equal voices, regardless of their size, strength, or mental abilities. A democracy? Ambassador Hieri asked, sounding interested. More than that, the Admiral said. A place where species can learn from each other instead of conquering each other. And, Captain, Earth wants your crew to run it. The bridge fell silent. They were explorers, not politicians. Sir, Commander Yuna said carefully, we're not qualified to run a galactic government. Maybe not, the Admiral agreed, but you're the only beings in the galaxy that every major species both respects and trusts. The Villani see you as protectors, the Crix see you as honorable enemies, the Thylorians see you as teachers. Engineer Do-hyun laughed quietly. What do the humans see us as? Heroes, the Admiral said simply. The crew that went out to shake hands and ended up reshaping the galaxy. Over the following months, the Galactic Council began to take shape. It wasn't easy. Species that had been enemies for millennia had to learn to sit in the same room without fighting. Ancient grudges had to be set aside in favor of cooperation. The humans found themselves in the strange position of being mediators between beings who were older, stronger, and more advanced than them in every way except one: the ability to change. The problem, Dr. Jiwoo explained to a council session filled with representatives from 50 species, is that you've all become too specialized. The Crix only know war. The Thylorians only know mental control. The Villani only know trade. Humans know a little bit of everything. A Crix representative, one of the few who had chosen cooperation over conquest, clicked his mandibles in confusion. How is knowing less better than knowing more? It's not knowing less, Pilot Subin said from the human delegation table. It's knowing that you don't know everything. When you think you have all the answers, you stop looking for better ones. The first major test of the Galactic Council came when the Zephyrian warrior clans declared war on the Althari Peace Collective. It was an ancient conflict over mining rights to a system of dead worlds. Under the old system, the stronger Zephyrians would have simply conquered the pacifist Althari. Under the new system, both sides had to explain their position to the council. Captain Minho listened to both sides present their cases. The Zephyrians claimed the right of conquest. They were stronger, so they deserved the resources. The Althari claimed the right of first discovery. They had found the system, so it belonged to them. Both of your arguments are based on the old way of thinking, Minho said when they finished. Might makes right, or first come first served. But what if we tried a different approach? He stood up and walked to the holographic display showing the disputed system. These are dead worlds. No one lives there. The only value is in the minerals. So why not share them? Both sides began objecting at once, but Minho continued. The Zephyrians have the best mining technology in the galaxy. The Althari have the best organizational skills. Together you could extract more resources than either could alone. Share with our enemies? The Zephyrian war chief growled. Work with weaklings who can't even fight? The Althari diplomat asked. Yes, said Ambassador Hieri calmly. That's exactly what we're suggesting. You might be surprised by what you learn from each other. It took 3 months of negotiation, but eventually the Zephyrian-Althari joint mining venture was established. Within a year, it was producing more resources than anyone had thought possible, and both species were asking why they had spent so many centuries fighting instead of cooperating. Similar successes followed. The Thylorian individuals, as they now called themselves, began sharing their mental techniques with other species, but as gifts rather than impositions. The reformed Krix used their strength to protect weak species instead of conquering them. The Villani expanded their trade networks to include former enemies. But the real change was deeper than politics or economics. It was philosophical. Across the galaxy, species were learning to ask the question that humans asked about everything. Why? Why did things have to be done the old way? Why couldn't enemies become friends? Why couldn't different species learn from each other instead of fighting? The answers they found surprised everyone. Captain, Dr. Jiwoo said one day, as they watched a group of young Krix and Althari working together on an engineering project. I think I understand what we've really done. What's that? Minho asked. We didn't conquer the galaxy, she said. We infected it, Minho looked puzzled. Infected it with what? Hope, she said simply. The idea that things can be better than they are. That's the most human thing of all, the belief that no matter how bad things get, they can always improve. Engineer Do-hyun was listening from his console. Is that why other species think we're so dangerous? Exactly, Jiwoo said. We don't just fight their armies or resist their mental powers. We make them question whether they need armies or mental powers at all. Commander Yuna nodded thoughtfully. We make them want to change. And for species that have done things the same way for millions of years, that's terrifying. But also exciting, added Pilot Subin. Look at how many have chosen to change anyway. Minho looked around the bridge at his crew, then out at the stars beyond. They had set out to explore the galaxy and make new friends. They had ended up reshaping the very nature of galactic civilization. Computer, he said, open a channel to all council member species. When the communication network activated, connecting hundreds of worlds across dozens of star systems, Minho spoke carefully. This is Captain Lee Minho of the human vessel Horizon's Edge. 6 months ago, we established the Galactic Council to replace the old systems of conquest and control. Today, I want to announce that the Council's job is finished. Shocked voices began coming from speakers across the bridge as alien leaders demanded explanations. Not because we've failed, Minho continued, but because we've succeeded. You don't need humans to tell you how to cooperate anymore. You've learned to do it yourselves. He smiled as he spoke the words that would end humanity's brief role as galactic mediators. The Council will continue, but under the leadership of species who have chosen cooperation over conquest. Humans will return to what we do best, exploring the unknown and asking questions that nobody else thinks to ask. As the Horizon's Edge set course for unexplored regions of the galaxy, the crew reflected on their journey. They had met aliens who thought humans were weak, and taught them that strength came in many forms. They had faced creatures who believed might made right, and shown them that cooperation was stronger than conquest. The news of humanity's resistance to Thylorian mind control spread even faster than their victory over the Krix. Across the galaxy, Species that had hidden from the energy beings for millions of years began to whisper about hope. The Thylorian collective was in chaos. For the first time in their history, they had met minds they could not dominate. Zalthus called an emergency gathering of all Thylorian prime minds. The humans are more dangerous than we thought, he admitted to the council. Their minds are unchaotic, unpredictable. When I tried to control the leader, his thoughts infected mine. Infected? Asked Kierthan, the mind shaper. What do you mean? I felt things, Zalthus said, his energy form flickering with disturbance. Physical sensations, emotions, fear and hope existing at the same time. It was maddening. The other Thylorians listened in horror. They had evolved beyond physical form millions of years ago specifically to avoid such crude experiences. We cannot allow this contamination to spread, declared Elder Thylos, the oldest of their kind. If other species learn that we can be resisted, our control of this galaxy will end. What do you suggest? Asked Zalthus. We use our greatest weapon, Thylos replied. The crystal matrix. The other Thylorians fell silent. The crystal matrix was a massive construct that could amplify Thylorian mental power 1,000 times. They had never needed to use it before, since normal psychic attacks were enough to control any species. Are you certain? Kierthan asked. The matrix requires the combined power of 50 Thylorian primes. If we fail, we will not fail, Thylos said firmly. No mind can resist the full power of the collective. Meanwhile, aboard the Horizon's Edge, Dr. Jiwoo was studying the data from their encounter with the Thylorians. Captain, she said, looking up from her computer, I've been analyzing the psychic attack patterns. I think I understand why we could resist them. Minho joined her at the medical station. What did you find? Human brains are different from other species we've encountered, she explained. We have more connections between different regions, more chaos in our neural patterns. It's like trying to catch smoke with a net. Engineer Do-Yun looked interested. Is that why humans are so good at creative problem solving? Exactly, Jiwoo said. Other species think in straight lines. We think in spirals, loops, and tangles. It drives aliens crazy, but it's how we survived on Earth. Commander Yuna was monitoring space around their ship. Speaking of aliens, we have company again. Multiple ships approaching, and they're huge. On the main screen appeared a fleet unlike anything they had seen before. 50 crystalline ships, each one the size of a small moon, moved toward them in perfect formation. Oh, said Pilot Subin quietly. That's a lot of ships. The lead ship contacted them, and Thylos's ancient voice filled the bridge. Humans, you have interfered with the natural order of the galaxy. You will submit to correction or you will be destroyed. Natural order? Ambassador Hieri asked. You mean the order where you control everyone else? We are the evolved form of consciousness, Thylos replied. Physical beings are children who require guidance. You have confused that guidance with oppression. Maybe because it is oppression, Captain Minho said calmly. The crystal matrix began to glow in the center of the Thylorian fleet. It was a structure of pure crystallized thought, beautiful and terrible at the same time. You will understand, Thylos said. When your minds are properly organized, you will see that we acted out of love. The psychic attack that followed was beyond anything the humans had experienced. It wasn't just one Thylorian trying to control them, but 50 of the most powerful minds in the galaxy working together. The bridge crew staggered as the mental pressure hit them. This was not the gentle probing they had felt before. This was a hurricane of forced thoughts trying to reshape their consciousness. Most species would have surrendered in seconds. Even the Cricks would have knelt and begged for mercy, but humans had lived through ice ages. Captain Minho felt the attack trying to organize his thoughts into neat, logical patterns. He resisted by remembering his childhood in Seoul, where he had learned to find peace in the middle of chaos. His mind became like a busy city street, too much happening for any outside force to control. Dr. Jiwoo fought back with scientific curiosity. Instead of resisting the attack, she studied it, analyzing how the Thylorian minds worked. Her fascination with the process confused the aliens, who had never encountered a victim who wanted to understand them. Commander Yuna used her military training, treating the mental attack like any other weapon. She built defenses in her mind, creating false thoughts to distract the attackers while keeping her real plans hidden. Engineer Do-Hyun turned the attack into a puzzle to solve. How were the Thylorians coordinating their efforts? What were the weak points in their mental formation? His engineering mind began finding flaws in their perfect system. Pilot Subin simply let her mind go blank, using meditation techniques her grandmother had taught her. When the Thylorians tried to grab her thoughts, there was nothing there to catch. Ambassador Hieri did something even more clever. She began thinking about peace negotiations, imagining how she could help the Thylorians and other species find common ground. Her genuinely diplomatic thoughts confused the attackers, who couldn't understand why someone under attack would still try to help them. "This is impossible," Thylos screamed across the psychic link. "Submit, you must submit!" "Why?" Minho asked, his voice perfectly calm despite the massive mental assault. "What makes you think you have the right to control us?" That simple question hit the Thylorians harder than any physical weapon could have. For millions of years, no one had questioned their right to rule. They had simply assumed they were superior because they were more advanced. But humans asked why about everything. "We are evolved beyond physical form," Zalthis shouted. "We are pure intellect." "So what?" Dohyun asked. "Being different doesn't make you better. It just makes you different." The Thylorians had never encountered this kind of response. Species usually submitted out of fear or fought back with rage. Humans were doing neither. They were having a philosophical discussion while resisting the most powerful psychic attack in galactic history. Dr. Jiwoo made her most important discovery during the battle. "Captain," she said, her voice strained but excited, "I can see their thought patterns now. They're not really individuals. They're more like parts of a single giant mind." "What does that mean?" Yuna asked while fighting off another wave of mental pressure. "It means they don't understand individual thought," Jiwoo explained. "They've forgotten what it's like to be alone inside your own head. That's why they can't control us. We're too individual." Minho understood immediately. The Thylorians were like fingers on a hand, connected, coordinated, but not truly separate. Humans were like individual tools in a toolbox, each one different, each one useful for different purposes. "You're lonely," he said across the psychic link, his voice filled with sympathy instead of anger. The mental attack stopped suddenly, as if the Thylorians had been slapped. "What?" Thylos whispered. "You evolved beyond individual thought," Minho continued. "But you lost something important. You lost the ability to be alone with your own ideas. That's why you need to control other minds. You've forgotten how to be individuals." For a long moment, the space between the two fleets was completely silent. Then slowly, the crystal matrix began to dim. Thylos began, then stopped. For the first time in millions of years, a Thylorian was thinking an original thought. "We had not considered—" "It's okay," Hieri said gently. "Being part of a collective isn't wrong, but trying to force everyone else to join you is wrong." The Thylorian fleet began to retreat, but not in anger or fear. They moved slowly, as if they were thinking about something they had never considered before. "We will think about this," Thylos said finally. "Alone." As the crystalline ships disappeared, the human crew sat in stunned silence. Did we just convince a species of energy beings to try individual thought? Subin asked. "I think so," Minho said, sounding as surprised as everyone else. "That might be more dangerous than defeating them in battle," Yuna observed. She was right. Across the galaxy, other species were hearing about what had happened. The humans hadn't just resisted the Thylorians. They had made them question everything they believed about themselves. If humans could do that to the galaxy's most powerful psychic species, what else could they do? The answer was spreading through space at the speed of light, carried by traders, diplomats, and refugees from a dozen different worlds. Humans were more than just good fighters or strong thinkers. They were teachers, and that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. News traveled fast in the galaxy. Within days of the Krik's defeat, every major species had heard about the humans. The Villani couldn't believe it at first. "Impossible," Trade Master Veltar said to his council. "The humans are small and gentle. They live on planet surfaces like children. How could they defeat Krik's warriors?" But the proof was in the recordings. The Kriks had sent warnings to all ships about the demon creatures who fought without honor. They described humans as monsters who could see in the dark, survive in deadly environments, and predict enemy movements. The Villani Emergency Council met to discuss this news. "If the humans can defeat the Kriks," said Elder Kitron, "what does that make them? Are they the most dangerous species in the galaxy? Maybe we were wrong about them," Veltar admitted. Maybe living on planet surfaces doesn't make them weak. Maybe it makes them strong. Word spread to every corner of civilized space. The peaceful Althari sent messages asking for protection treaties. The warrior Zephyrians offered to pay tribute. Even the proud Centauri began talking about alliance possibilities. But one species was not impressed by the humans' victory over the Crix. The Thylorian collective had ruled their part of space for millions of years. They were beings of pure energy who considered all physical creatures to be inferior. They lived in ships made of crystallized thought and controlled matter with the power of their minds. These humans defeated some armored insects, said Thylorian Prime Zalthus to his council. This means nothing to us. Physical combat is primitive. Mental power is true strength. The Thylorians had never been challenged because no physical being could resist their psychic abilities. They could control minds, create illusions, and even stop hearts with focused thought. Perhaps we should investigate these humans, suggested Thylorian mind shaper Kyrthan. If they are becoming influential in the galaxy, we should know their capabilities. Agreed, Zalthus said. But there is no danger. No matter how well they fight with primitive weapons, they cannot resist the power of pure thought. Meanwhile, aboard the Horizon's Edge, Captain Minho was dealing with the consequences of his crew's reputation. Captain, said Communications Officer Hieri, I'm getting messages from 17 different species. They all want to talk to us. What do they want? Minho asked. 3 want to surrender to us. 5 want to hire us as mercenaries. 4 want to form alliances. 2 want to challenge us to combat. 1 wants to worship us as gods. 1 wants our autographs. And 1 is asking for cooking recipes. Dr. Jiwoo looked up from her medical station. Cooking recipes? The Villani think that eating the food of such dangerous predators might make them stronger, Hieri explained. The crew laughed, but Minho felt worried. They had come to explore and make friends, not to become the galaxy's most feared species. Send polite responses to everyone, he ordered. We're explorers, not conquerors. Engineer Do-hyun was studying the scanner readings. Captain, I'm detecting a large energy signature approaching. It's unlike anything in our databases. On the main screen appeared a ship that looked like it was made of living crystal. It glowed with internal light and seemed to shift shape as they watched. Unknown vessel, came a voice that seemed to speak directly inside their minds. I am Thylorian Prime Zalthus. Prepare to be scanned. Before anyone could respond, the humans felt a strange pressure in their heads. It was like having someone try to read their thoughts by force. Most species would have surrendered immediately to the overwhelming mental power. But humans were different. Captain Minho had practiced meditation for 20 years. His mind was trained to focus and resist distraction. When the Thylorian mental probe hit him, it felt like a strong wind, but his thoughts remained his own. Interesting, he said calmly. Are you trying to read my mind? Zalthus was shocked. No physical being had ever resisted Thylorian mental control. You will submit to our examination. The mental pressure increased, but Minho just closed his eyes and began breathing exercises he had learned as a child. His mind became like a calm lake that the Thylorian attacks couldn't disturb. Commander Yuna felt the mental attack too, but her military training had prepared her for psychological warfare. She had learned to compartmentalize her thoughts, keeping important information locked away even under torture. Is that the best you can do? She asked. I've had headaches worse than this. Pilot Subin was having the easiest time of all. She practiced traditional Korean meditation and martial arts. Her mind was so disciplined that the Thylorian couldn't even find her thoughts to attack. This is impossible, Zalthus said, his mental voice filled with confusion. All physical beings submit to our power. What are you? Dr. Jiwoo was fascinated by the experience. As a scientist, she found the Thylorian mental abilities interesting rather than frightening. We're human, she said. We come from a world where mental discipline was necessary for survival. Our ancestors had to think clearly while being chased by predators, during natural disasters, and in life-or-death situations. The Thylorians tried different approaches. They attempted to create fear illusions, showing the humans images of their worst nightmares. But humans had lived with real nightmares for thousands of years. Their imaginations were too strong to be controlled by outside forces. They tried to overwhelm the human minds with complex mathematical problems. But humans had created mathematics as a tool for understanding their chaotic world. The problems seemed simple to creatures who had invented calculus and quantum physics. They even tried to seduce the humans with visions of perfect paradise worlds. But humans had dreamed of paradise while living in harsh reality. Their dreams were their own, not something that could be imposed from outside. "This cannot be," Zalthus said, his confidence finally shaking. "We are the masters of all thought. We control the very essence of consciousness itself. Maybe you control some kinds of consciousness," Ambassador Hieri said diplomatically, "but human consciousness developed differently." She was right. Human minds had evolved on a world full of predators, natural disasters, and constant change. They had learned to think quickly, adapt constantly, and keep fighting even when everything seemed hopeless. Other species had developed in more stable environments. Their minds were organized and predictable. The Thylorians had learned to control such minds easily, but human minds were chaos. They held contradictory thoughts simultaneously, created impossible dreams, and found hope in hopeless situations. There was nothing for the Thylorians to grab hold of. Engineer Do-hyun was actually enjoying the mental contact. "This is fascinating," he said. "Your thought patterns are completely linear, very efficient, but also very limited." "Limited?" Zalthus was offended. "We are beings of pure intellect." "Pure, yes," Do-hyun agreed. "But humans learned that chaos and contradiction often lead to better solutions than pure logic." The Thylorian tried one final attack, pouring all his mental energy into breaking Captain Minho's resistance. For a moment, the bridge was filled with crackling energy as two completely different types of consciousness clashed. Then something unexpected happened. Minho's thoughts began to flow backward along the mental connection. The Thylorian suddenly found his own mind filled with human memories and emotions. He experienced what it felt like to be a physical being who could die. He felt fear, love, anger, and hope all at the same time. He understood what it meant to fight against impossible odds and win through determination alone. For the first time in millions of years, a Thylorian experienced doubt. "What? What are you doing to me?" Zalthus gasped. "Nothing," Minho said gently. "You opened the connection. I'm just sharing what it's like to be human." The Thylorian ship began to retreat, its crystalline surface flickering with confused energy. "This is not over," Zalthus said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "We will study you further." "You're welcome to visit anytime," Hieri said politely. "We enjoy meeting new friends." After the Thylorian ship disappeared, the human crew sat quietly for a moment, processing what had just happened. "Well," said Subin finally, "that was different from fighting the Krays." "They weren't evil," Dr. Jiwoo observed. "Just very sure of themselves. Pride," Captain Minho said. "It makes beings do stupid things whether they're made of matter or energy." "Do you think they'll be back?" Do-hyun asked. "Probably," Yuna said. "But maybe next time they'll try talking instead of mind controlling." Minho nodded. The galaxy was full of different species, each one convinced they were superior to all others. Humans would have to teach them that superiority wasn't about strength or mental power. It was about being able to adapt, to learn and to keep going no matter what the universe threw at you. And humans were very, very good at that. The battle on the bridge was just the beginning. Throughout the horizon's edge, Crick's boarding parties were discovering that their easy victory was becoming a nightmare. In the medical bay, Dr. Jiwoo faced 3 Crick's warriors who had come to search for valuable equipment. They expected to find a helpless healer, but they found something much more dangerous. A human who understood exactly how living things worked. "You are the ship's healer?" asked the lead warrior, his voice mocking. "How cute. The tiny creatures have a tiny doctor." Jiwoo smiled and picked up a medical scanner. To the Cricks, it looked like a harmless tool. They didn't know that every human doctor was also trained in combat medicine, which meant they knew how to cause damage as well as heal it. "I am a doctor, yes," she said calmly. "I study living things." The warrior reached for her with his massive clawed hand. Jiwoo ducked under his arm and pressed the scanner against an unarmored spot on his neck. The device sent a focused electromagnetic pulse directly into his nervous system. The warrior collapsed, his armor clattering against the floor. He wasn't dead, just unconscious. Jiwoo had calculated the exact pulse needed to shut down his brain temporarily without causing permanent damage. "What did you do to him?" demanded another warrior, raising his weapon. "I put him to sleep," Jiwoo said. "Would you like to join him?" The remaining warriors looked at their fallen comrade, then at the small human holding what they thought was a simple medical tool. For the first time in their lives, the Cricks felt something they didn't recognize: fear. In the engine room, Kim Do-yun was dealing with his own problems. 5 Krix engineers had come to steal human technology, but they were finding that human machines didn't work the way they expected. "This engine design makes no sense," complained one of the aliens. "How does it produce so much power from such a small space?" Do-hyun was hiding behind a power conduit, listening to them tear apart his carefully maintained equipment. These aliens might be strong, but they didn't understand human engineering. He pressed a button on his wrist communicator, sending a silent signal to the ship's computer. Immediately, the engine room began to change. The lights dimmed to emergency level. The air recyclers switched to combat mode, pumping out thick mist that made it hard to see. The temperature began dropping toward freezing. "What's happening?" one of the Krix shouted. "Emergency protocols," Do-hyun called out from his hiding spot. "The ship thinks we're under attack." "We are under attack, you fool," another warrior yelled back. "I know," Do-hyun said. "I activated them." The Krix warriors began stumbling around in the mist and darkness. Their armor was designed for their homeworld's bright, warm environment. In the cold and fog, they couldn't see or move properly, but Do-hyun could. He had grown up in Seoul, where winter fog and ice storms were normal. This environment felt like home to him. He moved through the engine room like a ghost, appearing just long enough to sabotage the Krix equipment or disable a warrior, then disappearing again into the mist. Back on the bridge, the battle was getting more intense. Commander Yuna found herself facing Klaxith himself, the massive Krix war leader who had never lost a fight. "You fight well for such a small creature," Klaxith admitted, swinging his claws at her head. "But you cannot win. I am the strongest warrior in the Krix fleet." Yuna dodged his attack and rolled behind a computer console. "Maybe," she said. "But strength isn't everything." She had been studying the Krix fighting style. They relied on power and intimidation, but they were predictable. Every attack followed the same pattern, like a dance they had learned by heart. Humans fought differently. They adapted. They improvised. They used whatever they could find as weapons. Yuna grabbed a handful of metal pieces from a broken panel and threw them at Klaxith's face. He raised his arms to block them exactly like she knew he would. While he was distracted, she rolled under his legs and struck at the power cables feeding his armor. Sparks flew and half his system shut down. Suddenly, his armor felt twice as heavy. "Impossible," Klaxith roared, the word that was becoming the Krix battle cry. "How did you know where to strike?" "I watched you fight," Yuna said simply. "You're strong, but you're predictable." Captain Minho was dealing with his own opponent, a Krix warrior who seemed confused by the humans' calm behavior. "Why are you not afraid?" The warrior demanded. "We are the most feared species in the galaxy. Entire worlds surrender when they see our ships." "I'm sure they do," Minho said politely. "But we're not from this galaxy." It was a small lie, but it had the desired effect. The warrior hesitated, trying to understand what this might mean. In that moment of confusion, Minho struck. He had learned martial arts as a child, not for fighting, but for discipline and fitness. Now those old lessons saved his life. His hand shot out and hit a pressure point on the warrior's neck just below the helmet. The Krix staggered, his coordination disrupted. How did you?" The warrior gasped. "I told you," Minho said. "We're not what you expected." Throughout the ship, the pattern was the same. The Krix had expected an easy victory over weak, primitive aliens. Instead, they found themselves fighting creatures who seemed to know exactly how to hurt them. The humans used everything as weapons: medical tools, engineering equipment, even furniture. They turned the ship itself into a weapon, using the environmental controls to create conditions that favored human fighting styles. Most surprising of all, the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. Pilot Subin laughed as she swung from a ceiling cable to kick a Krix warrior in the head. "This is fun. It's like playing soccer, except the ball can shoot back." Ambassador Hieri used her diplomatic training to confuse the aliens with complex arguments while striking at their weak spots. "You say you're the strongest, but strength without wisdom is just violence, don't you think?" The Krix warriors began to retreat toward the cargo bay where they had entered the ship. They had never experienced anything like this. These small, soft creatures were tearing apart a Krix boarding party with nothing but improvised weapons and clever tactics. "Retreat," Klaxith ordered, his voice filled with shame. "Back to the ships." "Already?" Minho asked politely. "But you just got here." The surviving Creek ran through the corridors, desperate to escape the nightmare their easy raid had become. Behind them, the humans followed, not to attack, but to make sure they actually left. As the Crick's boarding ships disconnected from the horizon's edge, Klaxith sent one final message. "This is not over, humans. The Crick's empire does not forget. We will return with more ships. We'll be here," Minho replied calmly. After the Crick's ships disappeared, the human crew gathered on the bridge to check their injuries. A few cuts and bruises, but nothing serious. "Well," said Dr. Jiwoo, cleaning a small scratch on her arm. "That was educational." "They really thought we were helpless," Subin said, shaking her head. "Can you blame them?" Do-hyun asked. "Look at us. We're half their size, we don't have armor or claws, and we smiled at them when they threatened us. Maybe we should have been more scary," Yeri suggested. "We were scary," Yuna said with a grin. "We just don't look it." Captain Minho looked at his crew with pride. They had faced the galaxy's most feared warriors and won, not through superior firepower but through superior thinking. "Computer," he said, "send a message to the Villani. Tell them we met the Cricks." "What should the message say?" the computer asked. Minho thought for a moment. "Tell them the Cricks aren't as dangerous as they thought." 3 days after leaving the Villani, the horizon's edge moved through a quiet part of space near the outer rim. The crew was busy with their normal work when the ship's alarm started screaming. "Captain," Subin called from her pilot seat. 3 large ships just appeared on our sensors. They're coming straight at us really fast." Minho looked at the main screen as the computer showed him the approaching ships. They were huge, dark, and covered in sharp points. They looked like giant insects made of metal and weapons. "Those are Crick's ships," Dr. Jiwoo said, checking her database. "The Villani data matches perfectly." "Are they trying to talk to us?" Yeri asked, hoping for a peaceful meeting. "No messages," Subin replied. "They're just getting closer." "And Captain, they have their weapons ready." Commander Yuna moved to her tactical station. "Our shields are up, but those ships are much bigger than ours. If they want to fight, we're in trouble." Before anyone could answer, a deep, harsh voice filled the bridge. It sounded like metal scraping against stone. "Small ship, you are in Crick space without permission. Prepare to be boarded or be destroyed." Minho stepped forward. "This is Captain Lee Minho of the human vessel Horizon's Edge. We mean no harm. We're just exploring. Humans?" The voice laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Never heard of you. Does not matter. You will surrender now, or we will take your ship by force." The 3 Crick ships surrounded the horizon's edge like hunters circling prey. Each one was 10 times larger than the human ship. Energy beams shot out and grabbed the human vessel, holding it in place. "Shields are failing," Yuna reported. "They're pulling us into the largest ship. Should we fight?" Do-hyun asked, his hands already moving toward the weapons controls. Minho thought quickly. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but sometimes the smart thing to do was wait and see what happened. "No," he said quietly. "Let them board us. We'll learn more about them this way." The horizon's edge was pulled into the huge Crick ship. The human crew could feel their ship being locked in place by heavy metal clamps. Then came the sound of cutting tools working on their hull. "They're opening a hole in our cargo bay," Do-hyun reported. "Big enough for large creatures to get through." "Everyone stay calm," Minho ordered. "Remember your training. Watch and learn." Heavy footsteps echoed through the ship. The sounds were getting closer. Then the bridge doors exploded inward and the Crick's warriors entered. The humans had never seen anything like them. Each Crick stood nearly 3 meters tall, with thick armor covering their entire bodies. They had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could tear through metal. Their heads looked like giant insect skulls with glowing red eyes. The leader was even bigger than the others. Scars covered his armor, and his claws were stained dark with old blood. He looked around the bridge with hungry eyes. "I am Klaxith, war leader of the Crick's 3rd Fleet," he said in that grinding voice. "You are now prisoners of the Crick's empire." The humans stood perfectly still. They had been trained for this kind of situation, but the training had never included aliens this frightening. Klaxith walked up to Captain Minho, who barely reached the alien's chest. "You are the leader of these tiny creatures?" "I am," Minho said without fear. Klaxith made a sound that might have been laughter. "So small, so weak. Your people must live on a paradise world with no dangers. Otherwise, you would have grown strong like us." "We manage," Minho said simply. "Not anymore," Klaxith replied. "Your people will make good slaves. small enough to work in tight spaces, weak enough that they cannot fight back. Dr. Jiwoo watched the Krix warriors carefully. Their armor was thick, but she could see joints and weak spots. Their movements were powerful but slow. They were built for strength, not speed. "Take them to the holding cells," Klaxth ordered his soldiers. "Search the ship for anything valuable." As the Krix moved to grab the humans, Do-hyun quietly pressed a button on his engineering panel. It looked like he was turning off the lights, but actually he was activating emergency protocols. The ship's computer began making small changes. The air mixture shifted slightly. The temperature started to drop. The gravity increased just a little. To humans, these changes felt normal. To most alien species, they would be uncomfortable or even dangerous, but the Krix didn't notice right away. They were too busy enjoying their easy victory. "Your ship is primitive," one of the warriors said, looking at the human technology. "These weapons are toys. These computers are simple. How did your people even reach the stars?" "We're curious," Hyeri said quietly. The Krix warrior laughed and reached for her with his clawed hand. That was his first mistake. Hyeri moved. She didn't just step away. She moved with the quick, smooth speed of a human who had trained in combat her whole life. Her hand struck the warrior's wrist at exactly the right spot, hitting a nerve cluster that even his armor couldn't protect. The warrior's hand went numb, and he dropped his weapon. Before he could react, Hyeri had picked up the fallen gun and pointed it at his head. "That's not possible," Klaxth said, staring in shock. "You move too fast. No creature that small can move that fast." The other humans were moving now too. Subin grabbed a metal pipe from a broken panel and swung it at another warrior's knee joint. The pipe bent from the impact, but the Krix stumbled. Commander Yuna had found an emergency fire extinguisher. She sprayed the freezing chemical directly into a warrior's face where his helmet had gaps for breathing. The Krix screamed and clawed at his eyes. "Can stop!" Klaxth roared. "You cannot fight us. We are Krix. We are the strongest warriors in the galaxy." "Maybe," Minho said calmly, "but you're not the smartest." That's when the Krix finally noticed the changes in the ship's environment. The air was getting thinner. The temperature was dropping fast. The gravity was increasing to levels that made their heavy armor feel even heavier. "What is happening?" Klaxth demanded. "Emergency life support," Do-hyun said with a smile. "The ship thinks we're in danger, so it's adjusting everything for human survival." The Krix warriors were starting to breathe hard. Their armor, designed for their homeworld's environment, was becoming a burden in the ship's new conditions. "This is impossible," one warrior gasped. "How can you fight in these conditions?" "These are normal conditions for us," Dr. Jiwoo explained. "Our homeworld is much harsher than this." The truth was starting to dawn on the Krix. These small, soft-looking creatures were not weak at all. They were adapted to survive in conditions that would kill most other species. "You lied to us," Klaxth said, his voice filled with rage. "You pretended to be helpless." "We never said we were helpless," Minho replied. "You assumed it. The fight was just beginning." The Krix had size and strength, but the humans had speed, intelligence, and something the aliens had never encountered before. They had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them, and they had learned how to kill back. Klaxth raised his weapon, but Han Subin was already moving. She rolled under his arm, came up behind him, and struck at the power cable connecting his armor to his weapon system. Sparks flew, and his gun died in his hands. "Impossible," he roared again. "No," Minho said quietly. "Just human." Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Horizon's Edge, watching the stars through the main screen. His crew had been traveling for 3 months, looking for new worlds and new friends among the stars. Today felt different. The ship's computers had found something interesting. "Captain," said pilot Han Subin from her chair, "I'm getting signals from an unknown ship. They're trying to talk to us." Minho nodded and straightened his uniform. "Put them on screen, Subin." The screen changed to show strange-looking creatures. They had long necks, big eyes, and skin that looked like tree bark. Their ship was beautiful with smooth curves and bright lights. The aliens looked peaceful and friendly. "Greetings, unknown travelers," said the alien leader in perfect human language. "I am Trademaster Veltar of the Vallani Federation. We welcome you to this part of space." Ambassador Kang Hyeri stepped forward. She had studied alien contact for years and knew how to handle this moment. "Thank you, Trademaster. I am Ambassador Hyeri of the human race. We come in peace, seeking friendship and trade." The Vallani looked surprised. Humans. We have never heard of your kind before. You look very small and soft. Are you sure you can survive in the deep space between stars? Dr. Park Ji-woo smiled from her position near the medical station. The Vallani seemed to think humans were weak because they looked different. She had seen this before when studying Earth animals. Often, the most dangerous creatures looked harmless. We manage well enough, Minho said with a calm voice. We've traveled far from our home world to meet new friends. Trademaster Veltar's big eyes grew even bigger. Homeworld? You mean you actually live on a planet's surface? Most civilized species gave up planetary living millions of years ago. Planet surfaces are too dangerous. Engineer Kim Do-yoon almost laughed but kept quiet. Earth was dangerous, but humans had learned to love danger. They built cities next to volcanoes and lived in places where the weather could kill them. To humans, a little danger made life interesting. Yes, we still live on planets, Harry said carefully. We find them quite comfortable. How strange, Veltar said, tilting his long neck. You must come from a very gentle world. A paradise planet with soft weather and easy living. Only creatures from such places could remain so small and delicate. The human crew exchanged quick looks. Earth was many things, but gentle was not one of them. Hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, and fires were normal parts of life. Humans had learned to survive ice ages and meteor strikes. They had fought their way to the top of a food chain filled with tigers, bears, and sharks. Perhaps we could visit each other's ships, Hayeri suggested. We could learn more about each other's cultures. Of course. Veltar seemed excited. But please be careful. Our ship might be too intense for your kind. We keep our gravity at normal levels, and our air mixture might be too strong for delicate lungs. Dr. Ji-woo checked her readings. The Vallani ship had gravity about half of Earth's normal level. Their air was mostly nitrogen and oxygen, but much thinner than what humans needed. To them, this was normal. To humans, it would feel like being on a tall mountain. We'll manage, Minho said simply. A few hours later, a small group of humans visited the Vallani ship. The aliens watched them carefully, worried that these fragile creatures might get hurt. They had prepared special breathing devices and gravity supports, but the humans didn't seem to need them. Yeri walked normally in the low gravity, while Dr. Ji-woo breathed the thin air without trouble. The Vallani were amazed. How can you move so easily? Asked Veltar's assistant, a young Vallani named Kitaron. This gravity should make you float around helplessly. We adapt quickly, Ji-woo said, not mentioning that Earth's gravity was twice as strong. Moving in this low gravity felt like floating in water. They toured the Vallani ship, which was filled with gardens and art. Everything was beautiful and peaceful. The Vallani showed them rooms full of books and music. They had never fought a war in their entire history. Your people must be very wise, Yeri said, genuinely impressed by their peaceful culture. We learned long ago that fighting only brings pain, Veltar explained. We trade with everyone and fight with no one. It has worked well for us. What about dangerous species? Minho asked. Surely not everyone in the galaxy is peaceful. Veltar's happy mood changed quickly. His skin turned a darker color, which the humans learned meant fear. There are others, he said quietly. The Krix Empire controls much of this region of space. They are not like us. They are large, strong, and covered in armor. They have sharp claws and powerful weapons. They take what they want and destroy what they cannot use. Kitron shivered even though the ship was warm. They have conquered hundreds of worlds. Their warriors are 3 times taller than any Vallani. They can tear metal with their bare hands. Have you ever fought them? Asked Commander Choi Yuna, who had been quiet until now. Fought them? Veltar looked shocked. No creature fights the Krix and lives. We give them what they want and hope they leave us alone. Sometimes it works. The humans listened carefully. They had heard of species like this before in their own history. Bullies who used fear to control others. Earth had produced many such creatures, but humans had always found ways to deal with them. Perhaps we should avoid their territory, Yeri said diplomatically. Yes, Veltar said quickly. You must promise me this. Your people are too small and gentle to survive meeting the Krix. They would destroy you without even trying. Please, for your own safety, stay far away from the outer rim sectors. As the humans prepared to return to their ship, the Vallani loaded them with gifts, food art and star charts showing safe trade routes. They also gave them detailed warnings about where the Krix might be found. Thank you for your kindness, Yeri said as they prepared to leave. We hope to trade with you again soon. Be safe, little ones, Veltar said with genuine worry. The galaxy is full of dangers that would crush such delicate beings. Stay close to civilized space. Back on their own ship, the human crew gathered in the meeting room. They spread out the star charts and studied the warnings about Crick's territory. They really think we're helpless, Subin said, shaking her head. Can you blame them? Jiwoo asked. Look at us from their point of view. We're half their size, we live on a planet's surface, and we've never met any alien species before. We must seem like children to them. Minho studied the charts showing Crick's territory. It covered a huge area of space, including some regions they needed to explore for their mission. What do you think? He asked his crew. Should we listen to their warnings? Dohyun smiled and cracked his knuckles. Captain, we didn't come all this way to hide from bullies. The others nodded in agreement. They were humans, after all. Running away from dangerous situations was not in their nature. Set course for the outer rim, Minho ordered. Let's see what these Cricks are really like.